Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, that's Shmuel Aleph. We are in the middle of chapter 14. We are about to read verse 17. We left the first portion of the chapter 14 at the point where Jonathan had struck down a small garrison, a small outpost of Philistine troops, which caused tremendous fear and confusion among the Philistines, among the Plishtim, so that now the entire camp of the Plishtim were running to and fro, afraid that the Israelites were attacking and coming out of their hiding places. It was a huge confusion and disarray. We left at verse 16 where Shaul, with his 600 men, saw this tremendous noise and confusion and everybody running helter skelter, and now let's see what Saul's reaction to all of this is going to be. The first thing he wants to figure out, who caused all of this? How did this happen? Vayomer Shaul la'am. So Saul said to the people Asher ito that were with him, Pikdu na'uru'u. Let's count up everyone, and we can see mi halach me'imanu, who left, like who it was that caused this whole ruckus going on with the Philistines. Vayifkedu, and they counted everyone. V'hinei ein Yonatan v'nosei kelav, and the only two people that were missing were Jonathan, and his assistant. So those two were clearly the ones that caused all of this. So what was Saul's reaction? Now, he's still afraid. Remember, Jonathan was brave, and Jonathan knew that what he had to do was action. Saul is still going to make the mistake of superstition. He's still going to make the mistake of, okay, we need to take advantage of this. We need, how do we get God on our side? So he made a huge mistake, again reminding us of previous stories where the people took out the Aron, took out the Ark of the Covenant, on the hope that somehow having that ark would help them. As we know, it didn't help them, it actually hurt them in the past. But Saul didn't learn that lesson. So Vayomer Shaul Achia, he said to Achia, who was functioning as the priest here, Hagisha Aron Elohim, bring out the ark of God, Ki haya Aron Elohim bayom hahu v'nei Yisrael, because they had the ark of God. At that time, it was already back with the people of Israel, as we had learned before. And he said, let's bring out the ark so we can get the benefit of that. But while he was speaking to the priest, the confusion, the ruckus, the mass pandemonium that had broken out among the camp of the Philistines, was getting greater and greater. So Shaul said to the Kohen, to his priest, Achia, Esov Yadacha, stop, we don't have time for that. We have to take advantage of it. So even at the last minute, it took so much for Saul to recognize that the approach is not with the ephod that the priest had, or the words of the priest, or the blessings, or the sacrifices, or whatever it was, or bringing out the magical ark, but action is what God wants. So Saul assembled all of the troops with him, and they charged into battle. And when they got into the battle, they saw that among the Philistines, they were fighting with each other. The confusion was so massive that they were killing each other. A tremendous confusion going on in the camp of the Philistines. And there were many of the Ivrim, many of the Hebrews, who, upon seeing that the Philistines' might was so strong and the might of the Jewish people were so small, they went and gathered amongst the enemy, and they were going to help out the Philistines. But those, when they saw what was happening, and they saw Saul's forces coming in to fight, and all the confusion, Asher alu imam b'machna, that they had been camped with the Philistines, Saviv, around them, so they joined up with the people of Israel, Asherim Shaul v'Yonatan, that were fighting with Saul and Jonathan, Shaul and Yonatan. V'chol ish Yisrael, and now hamitchabim b'har Ephraim, all of those that were hiding in the lands of Ephraim, hiding out in all of the caves and hiding places. The news came out that they all heard that the Philistines were running. So they joined the fight again against the Philistines. So now there's no longer just 600 men. Now we have thousands of people of Israel fighting against the Philistines. And God on that day saved the people of Israel. And the fighting continued past the of called Beit Aven. And this, it's notably, remember, Yosha, it says here that God rescued the people of Israel, but there was not through overt miracles, but because of the bravery and the faith that Yonatan had. The real faith, not the magical things that Saul was trying to do. V'ish Yisrael nigash bayom hahu. And the people of Israel nigas were oppressed on that day. They were hard pressed. Why were they hard pressed despite all this victory? Because Saul had done something else that was another mistake. Constantly looking, there's various understandings of why Saul did what we're about to read. But I'm going to explain this, what I feel is consistent with what we've been seeing all along. Okay, we couldn't get the ark. We couldn't get the ephod. We couldn't get the priest to give us some kind of blessing. We couldn't bring sacrifices, but we got to get God on our side somehow. Saul's still not getting the message. So let's fast. Because Saul had made an oath for all of the people and said, right? In other words, he had laid an oath upon all of the people as follows: Arur ha'ish, cursed be the man asher yochal lechem, that will eat. Literally, this means bread, but it's referring to any food ado erev, until the evening. And this way, we will get credit with God. V'nikamti me'hayavai, I will then have revenge against my enemies. V'lo to'am kol ha'am lachem. So no one ate bread. Now, telling soldiers while they're fighting a war and a battle not to eat is not exactly the wisest move. It's counterintuitive for obvious reasons, and will lead to weakness. And this would be the last thing that Saul should have done with the people. But although in his superstitious mind, where he thinks he needs to manipulate God to get God on his side, he's thinking that fasting will somehow be a good thing. V'chol ha'aretz ba'u ba'ya'ar, and everyone came and passed while they were passing through the fields, through the wilderness. Vayid dvash al pnei hasadeh, and there was a honeycomb, a beehive with honey that had been knocked out. Probably the beehive was probably knocked down in the course of the battle and was full of honey, but the soldiers didn't touch it. Vayavoham el hayar, and when the people came to the beehive, and they saw honey pouring out. But no one put their hand to their mouth. In other words, nobody took this honey. Because they were afraid of the shvua, of the oath that Saul had put upon the people. So this would have been a perfect opportunity to get a recharge, to get some energy to fight. But the honey was literally right in front of them. This reminds me, if you look at the MREs, the meals ready to eat that the U.S. Armed Forces gives to the soldiers when they're out in the field, there's many treats, candy and stuff, and a huge number of calories in each MRE. And the reason is because soldiers are burning up so many calories, they need that energy. The last thing you should do is tell them to fast. Keeping troops supplied with proper food is one of the most important things necessary for them to fight a successful battle. And here you had the honey, and the people couldn't touch it. V'Yonatan, and Jonathan lo shama b'hashbia aviv et am. He didn't hear when his father made this oath upon the people because he was busy fighting. So vayishlach et kitzei hamateh, and he asher biado, and when he saw the beehive, he put out his stick and dipped it vayitbol ota biyarat hadvash, and he dipped it in the beehive of honey, in the honeycomb. Vayashev yado el piv, and then he brought his mouth back to his hand back to his mouth, with the stick. Vata'orna and he ate it, right? Vata'orna and his eyes lit up. In other words, he had a burst of energy as he consumed the calories given to him by the honey. V'yan ishme'am, so someone from the people saw and said to him, Vayomer, your father had made an oath upon all of the people as follows, saying, that cursed is the person who eats anything today, and that's why people are exhausted. Vayomer Yonasan, Vaya'af could also mean exhausted, also means are famished. Vayomer Yonasan, and Jonathan said, Achara v'yetaretz. My father has ruined the land. He has brought pain to the people, brought problems. Ru'una ki oru einai. Look at me. Look at me now. See how my eyes have lit up, how I'm so full of energy. Ki ta'amti ma'at advash hazeh. And all I did was take a little bit on the stick. Imagine af ki lu achal hayom ha'am. If only the troops had eaten a little bit today, mishlal oyavav, from the booty of his enemies, asher matzah, that he has found. In other words, not just from the honey, but when they're attacking the enemy, they're also getting their stores of food. They could have eaten something. Ki ata lo rav samaka b'plishtim. If now, wouldn't there be so much more greater defeat against the Philistines? We would have smashed them even harder. So in other words, so Jonathan was recognizing this father's big mistake. He doesn't get it. When you're fighting a war, God wants you to fight a war the way a war should be fought. He's not looking for magical things. He's not looking. Now is not the time. This reminds me of the time before when Moses cries out to God as the people of Israel are being chased by the Egyptians and about to enter the Red Sea. When God says, "Matetzak Elai, why are you crying to me?" Now's not the time for prayer. Now's the time to move, go. And here Jonathan is saying, now's not the time for prayer or trying to get. Now is time for battle. Vayaku bayomahu. However, there was a victory here. The people did strike the Philistines, Michmas Ayalona, which started from Michmas all the way towards Ayalon. Back, in other words, because the Philistines are running back towards the coastal areas that they was their homeland. Vaya'afa Amod, and the people were extremely exhausted and extremely hungry. Now, what happens when the people are exhausted and hungry? When the day's over and it's time to eat, they're going to be famished, and they're not going to be careful as to what they eat and how. So Vayat Ha'am El Hashalal. So now that the Philistines had run, so the people pounced upon, is a translation I've seen which sounds good, Vayat. They pounced upon the booty that was with the Philistine camp, and if they had brought along animals to be slaughtered to feed the troops. So Vayikhu Tzonu Vakar, and they took the sheep and the cattle, Uvnei Vakar, and the young cattle, Vayishchatu Arza, and they slaughtered them towards the ground, in other words, on the ground, so that the Vayochal Ha'am Al Adam, and the people ate with the blood. Now, exactly what this means that the people ate with the blood. It was clearly a sinful act of eating, which was done because they were rushed and starving and hungry, rather than thinking, okay, how are we supposed to eat properly? So in other words, it's an effect of Saul's mistake. By thinking that he would win the favor of God, the people ended up doing something that was sinful, something that they're not supposed to do, and if anything, gain the wrath of God. Now, what does this mean? They ate on the blood. There's various ways of interpreting it. The Chazal, the rabbis, interpret this as they brought these animals as sacrifices, as a shlamim sacrifice, a peace offering to God, which a peace offering the people consume on their own, most of the animal, and they're not allowed to consume it before the blood itself is offered to God on the altar. So the people eating it on the blood, meaning they ate it before the blood had been brought on the altar. That's one understanding. Another understanding is brought by many of the commentaries, and the Radak discusses this, and that is, and the Radak explains that the simple meaning of these verses are this explanation, and that is though the people ate on the blood, meaning they slaughtered the animals on the ground, which didn't allow for the blood to completely pour out when the animal was slaughtered, because the animal is slaughtered by slicing the neck, and the carotid arteries and jugular veins are severed, and the animal will bleed a lot. And when the animal is raised, all the blood will bleed out and empty from the animal, and one is not allowed to eat the blood in the meat, right? The Torah says the blood has to be removed, and part of the process of removing the blood is allowing it all to drain. Now, if they slaughtered the animals on the ground, then it doesn't drain well, and it doesn't drain well, much more blood gets stuck in the meat, so that means the people ate the meat with the blood, which is forbidden by the Torah. Other understandings that also brought by the Radak and other commentaries is what this says they ate on the blood was like a pagan practice where they would put the blood as an offering to the pagan gods, and they would leave the blood around while they consumed the meat next to or surrounded by the blood of the animal. And this is what it means they ate it in like a pagan practice to an idol. So these are three understandings, and it's not clear which one it means, or maybe even something else. But I'm going to use the middle one that I said with the Radak, that they ate it with the blood because they didn't allow the blood to drain properly. And because I do agree, I mean, as the Radak said, it fits the best with the context. Vayagidu l'Shaol lemar, and it was told to Saul as follows: the people are sinning to God by eating with the blood. They didn't properly allow the blood to drain. They're eating the meat with the blood still in it. Vayomer bigadetem, and he said, you have rebelled against God. Golu elai hayom even gedola. I want you to roll towards me a large stone, because if you have a large stone, as the Radak also explains, then you can slaughter the animal when it's higher, so that all the blood drains properly. Vayomer Shaol, and so Saul said, Putzu ba'am, spread out among the people, va'amartem lahem, and tell them, Hagishu elai ishoro, each person needs to bring his ox to me, v'ish siehu, and each person should bring his sheep to me, u'shechatetem bozeh, and we will slaughter it here, v'achaltem, and then you can eat it. V'lo techatu l'Adonai le'achol al adam, and this way you will not sin to God by eating it with the blood. Vayagishu kolam ishoro biyado halayla v'yishchutu sham. So at that night, everyone brought their animals to Saul, and they shechted it there. And then vayiven Shaol mizbeach l'Adonai. Saul then built an altar to God. Oso heichel livnos mizbeach l'Adonai. With this altar, he began to build altar to God. So here now, bringing and setting up the altar. This is not said in a critical way. Here, Saul building an altar in order to have a ceremony to thank God for the victory of the day was certainly not a problematic issue. But it does show that his a poor decision of asking the people to fast not only made it harder for them to fight, which was the opposite of what he should have done, it also led to the people making a mistake and sinning. So again, we see Saul making the same mistake, and this is consistent with all the mistakes that we've seen until this point. Constantly believing that what God wants is some sort of ritual, some sort of prayer, some sort of superstition, believing in symbols like the ark or the ephod, and believing in the magical powers of the priests, which is exactly the opposite of what Jonathan was trying to say. No, we have to fight by using the power that we have. How can a few people win against the many? By sowing discord by among the many, by attacking the army in their weakness, finding out what was their morale like. If their morale is poor, we can take advantage of that. If there's food available, we eat it so that we can fight harder.
These are the things that Jonathan understood, and these were the lessons that Saul did not learn and did not understand. Thank you so much. This is chapter 14 is very long, so we're going to stop here, and looking forward to finishing chapter 14 together with you, and of course the rest of this beautiful book.